How are you?
I'm good, Georgi. Wait, do I pronounce your name Georgi?
Yes, that's the American way of pronouncing my name. That's
How
the
would you pronounce
every American call me Georgi. The correct way would be Georgi, but it's really pure Bulgarian, so I don't. I think along my
I'll call you
life,
Georgi then. I'll call you Georgi.
yeah, you nailed it. You nailed it. Pretty good pronunciation for for somebody that's not Bulgarian speaker.
That's
How
okay. Yeah, I'd rather do it right. So yeah, Georgi's fine.
how are you doing? What are you doing? What time is it there now?
It's 1:05 p.m. So midday.
Yeah, and here just after work, so sometimes it fits quite well between Frankfurt and you're in Brooklyn, right?
Yes. Yeah, I'm in a neighborhood called DUMBO, which is an acronym. It stands for Down Under the Manhattan Bridge Overpass. So it's a very picturesque neighborhood, and the Manhattan Bridge literally goes right over the neighborhood. And the Manhattan Bridge was built around 1900, so it's very old. It looks very industrial. And then we have the waterfront. The Brooklyn waterfront is right here too. So the neighborhood is very beautiful and it's nice.
I'm getting jealous, more jealous, and more jealous, and also because I know the neighborhood Dumbo because my favorite architectural office, it's called Bjork Ingels Group, has their main office in the US there.
Yeah.
So if you see
Might even
somewhere,
be in my building. I'm not sure. Yeah. But yeah.
might be. If they are, go say hi. We have get the guests from that office too. So for the people who don't know you, you can introduce a little bit yourself and tell a little bit what you do, who you are.
Yeah. My name is Scott Henderson. I'm an industrial designer. I have been an industrial designer for the last 30 odd years. And I work on mainly consumer products. That means the kinds of products that anyone can go out into the store and buy, stuff that real people own in their homes. And I love all aspects of design. I do sculpture too when I can. I do spaces, some architectural related projects, and I also spend quite a bit of time sort of promoting design in general, or working with the various industries like the IDSA, or I'm working with a television network at the moment called the By Design Television Network, and we're doing a TV show promoting the importance of design called America by Design. And so my whole world in life is essentially revolved around design, art, architecture, and I really enjoy it. It's ingrained in who I am to be a designer. And it's not what I do for a living. It's kind of who I am, at this point.
Yes, I understand that. So you're the perfect guest unintentionally because I stumbled in your Instagram account a few days ago, and then we made this we made happen this interview so quickly, which it's very cool. And usually the coolest interviews I have or the conversations rather are the one that happens spontaneously, and that's what I was trying to tell you also in the pre-chat of the podcast, is that I try to create some dialogue between the different disciplines of design and creativity, like it was back in the days, maybe in the 20s in Paris and in New York, in Berlin, where there were these cafes where they would meet all together and conversate. And nowadays we have podcasting, so you can sit in your office in Dumbo and can sit in my apartment in Frankfurt and talk to you. So it's really cool. And
I
think
love that image. I love the image of the artists getting together, like Van Gogh and Monet and all these people getting together, drinking some wine in Paris, talking about what they're doing. And all that stuff really happened.
Yeah, the problem is that for me it would be fine to have wine, but for you it's quite early in the day. I don't know what's what's the pace of Dumbo at this time of the day if it's already alcohol time. But I'm always curious to understand from each guest, what was the driving reason for you to try to pursue a creative professional career? Was there a moment in your life which you thought, okay, I want to try to be a professional designer or creative in some sense, or is a family thing? How did you come up with the idea that you wanted to be a designer, and when that happened?
It kind of happened very early in childhood, because I think the way that I was hardwired as a human being, it was difficult to do anything except this kind of thing, so I kept getting pulled back into my interest in being, doing art, illustration, drawing, and not interested in some of the other more traditional avenues of learning in school and so forth. I just kept getting pulled back into this world of creative, art and design. And so it eventually, just became clear that I should not fight with this. I should just go full on into it. And, so that's what I did. I went to an art school. And at the time, going into saying, okay, well, after high school, I'm going to an art school. A lot of people would say, well, that's a big risk. You don't want to wind up, struggling and so forth. And maybe you should take a more traditional path, sell insurance, be an accountant, whatever. But I couldn't. There was no choice. It was what I had to do, and it's what I knew I had to do, and there was no choice. There was no debate, really. It was this one path. That's it.
And are you from the area of New York, or did you happen to move in there, did you study, and eventually did you study there? Where did you study at this art school you went to?
Yeah, I grew up around the New York area, about an hour north of New York City. And I studied art. I went to an art school, design school, art and design, the Philadelphia College of Art and Design, which is now known as the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. And actually, the Philadelphia College of Art and Design is the oldest school that taught industrial design. It used to, in the late 1800s or something, it was founded, and it was called the Philadelphia College of Industrial Arts. So it was literally the first industrial design program in the United States.
Yeah, I understand. And when you got into the school, did you have any shock from what you got to study there, or the approach, or the professors you had? Because I think everybody that have studied something which is design related, they have you never know what it's going to be until you don't start doing it. So you have some sort of imagination or pictures in your head how it's going to be or how it's going to look like. Yeah. And then in reality it's sometimes slightly different. So what was your impression when you started studying design?
Oh, well, it was amazing, because I had left a high school situation where there were only one or two people like myself who demonstrated any real interest in this kind of thing, And then when you go to a school that's completely focused on it, you are surrounded by people that have skills and talents that far exceed yours. And so all of a sudden you're this little fish, and but it's so great because you're surrounded by all of these new bars that you have to try to rise up to meet. And one after the next, you're just surrounded by amazing people that are so talented and gifted and have so much vision, so it was a creative explosion of, it was just amazing. So the minute I got there, I was hooked, and I was really, sometimes frustrated. Like I had to really pull my skills up. It was hard to pull the skills up, to even be close to some of my fellow students. And so all of that was such a positive challenge. And, my design school experience definitely was one of the most positive memories that I have, for sure.
And what were the skills that you started studying there and developing? And did you have some of the professors which became your mentors, or did you discover some figures that you look up to? Because this is also another thing, that when you go in this fruitful environment, as you said, of creativity, you start, like, with this ripple effect, discovering more and more tools, more and more, so to say, knowledge in that direction, and then you discover more and more figures of that field, and then you have your, so to say, idols or mentors, and yeah.
Well, the skills that it takes to do this are one thing. But I do remember I had this one instructor, his name was Jack Andrews, and he sat us down when we were brand new design students, and he said something to the effect of, "What are you, or what do you want to be?" And we're all like, "Oh, we want to be designers." And he's like, "No, you are designers. You are designers, And he instilled in us this idea that we needed to embrace this 100% of the time. We had to become designers, not choose to work at the profession of design. So there's a big differentiation there. And then he also instilled in us this idea of, like, developing a design philosophy. He would almost ask us all the time, "What is your design philosophy?" And none of us, had any clue, of how to answer that. And so it was really interesting to have these big questions floating over our heads all the time that really made us think deeply about the philosophies surrounding trying to become a good designer. And so that was much more important in the long run than learning how to draw well or whatever other skills there are, because that overarching philosophy or mentality of how you approach being a designer or a creative professional is far more important than the skill development, which you're going to develop over time.
And what is your design philosophy nowadays after so many years of experience?
Right. Well, my design philosophy personally is all about harnessing a sort of a genome of the physics of our world, and being able to configure ideas and shapes and forms in a way that will meet the mind of the user with unimpeded flow. So in other words, creating an object or an experience or a product, any output that will meet the user with joy, and a feeling of it not being difficult, of a feeling of generating ease and a feeling of generating a casualness and a feeling of letting out or solving anxieties. And I really believe that you can create designs and experiences that do this. And it is the result of stitching together compositions and forms and thinking that are resulting from elements that surround us all the time. And my philosophy with that is, or my approach to that is to sensitize myself and realize that there are elements that I will be able to incorporate into whatever it is I'm thinking about or working on that are bombarding me constantly. And so it's just the key is to open your mind to be able to see these things, have this vision, to be able to be in the right place at the right time, to absorb these ideas that are coming at you, and you can't do that unless you have adopted what my instructor told us to adopt, which is to be a designer as opposed to doing design for a living, because once you've become a designer, you're gonna be at the right place at the right time to capture this information and use it and be able to wield it, so.
Yeah, today I was thinking something similar. I was thinking that being a designer, it's basically being constantly aware of what you don't like, how you would like it to be, and starting generating ideas about how it could be, and then turn these ideas into a design. So this is, for me, synthesized in a few sentences.
Yeah, well, another thing though, a lot of designers focus on that. What do I not like? What is the problem? And a big part of me as a designer is also to focus on not what these pain points or miseries of life are, but to also focus on the positive and joyful and great things about life and pull those elements into a design, and capture it, freeze positivity into it. So on the one hand, most designers, they do approach it like, where's the problem? What is the pain point? What is going on here that is causing us misery? And then let's fix that. But I think it's also equally important to say, what is joyful in life? What is great? And how can I pull those things into a design and capture it there so that it resonates with, it brings that same joy that's captured and frozen in there to someone else. So yeah, I love the idea of approaching design from this positive standpoint, almost infusing a little bit of lightness and humor and things like that into design that will make people smile and lighten up their day, and certainly solving a big physical problem to eliminate a pain point in life is great. And, that always is a formula for success, but approaching it as strictly looking for the misery to solve, I think eliminates a big amount of potential that you could otherwise draw upon from your palette of possibilities, by approaching it the other way, looking for the positives and trying to freeze that into it.
And how do you leave the process of designing? Because for me also, yes, there is the first moment of a design brief or of design task, even if it's architectural or product design, it's this excitement, no? Because you get the task, you get the puzzle, and you start playing with it. And then you start in my case, for example, if it's a building, you start collecting all the information you need for it, all the all the restrictions and all the possibilities, how you can stretch your design. And then after you have gathered this information, you start coming up with ideas. There is also a moment of frustration because now you see that it's not so easy. You're never happy with what it's the outcome and what is the output that you're bringing. And then you have to go through this sort of suffering until you don't achieve after sort of all the clutterness that has created slowly gets decluttered, and there is the design output. But there is one phase in which I think there is this I don't know if it's frustration, but yeah, it's like a little bit of of hard moments for the soul of the designer.
Yeah.
Do you manage to approach this in a very positive way, and how do you approach it, or how
Yeah.
do you overcome design blocks, so to say?
Well, what I do is whatever it is I might be doing, I'll look at everything that's ever been done on the subject before, and I'll look for what is missing. What's the obvious thing or an obvious thing that emerges from this field of prior art, what did someone else miss? What is the opportunity? What is the surprise that I can look for, and usually it's like pretty clear. You can stroll through a Bed Bath and Beyond or something, some big store that has a lot of consumer products. And so much of it comes across as non-special merchandise, and it almost leaps out at you that where the opportunity is to create something more elevated and more, that has more special resonance. And so that's what I look for is just, and also I also look for the opportunity to put sort of one big iconic idea into something that becomes memorable. So instead of 10 little ideas that try to work together in harmony, thinking about things in a more graphic, iconic, powerful, memorable way, so that you elevate this category somehow by infusing something into it that will stay with the person that has seen it, sort of tattoo itself onto the back of their eye, and so that's really the key, really. I think when you start a design project, you absorb all the information and criteria, but you're looking for a point of view that is unique and positive, that gets you excited. Like, what can we do with this? Here's our project. What can we do to this that is going to have a wow, impact, that's going to get people talking, that's going to have a conversation piece element to it, as opposed to, and it can be anything. It could be a piece of surgical equipment, but your approach to how it functions is so wide open, and you can find a way to mechanically make it work that is just out of the box compared to what has ever been done before. And then because it's so clever in its radical, different approach, people get joy out of it because they're like, look at how clever this is, and so it doesn't have to be a fun consumer product to do what I'm talking about. It can be a serious product too, but there's just ways of thinking about things where you kind of take what has been done before and you turn it upside down, or look at it backwards, or and you can come up with freshness that has never been done before. And I like to tell students too, they say, how do you do this? Like, how do you do it consistently, whatever? And the idea is you only need like a couple of these triumphs, before people start to notice, because it's different. It's difficult to do it. It's difficult to see it. It's difficult to execute on a simple idea that comes across as like a wow, how come no one ever thought of that before thing? And if you do it twice, even as a young designer, people will start to notice, and they'll be like, wow, that leap of creativity is so cool and rare. And so it's that coolness and that rareness that keeps bringing me back to these projects. It's why this idea of being an industrial designer never gets old for me, because I know, like, I love the feeling of getting there and finding that unexpected solution. And it's a rush. It's like a drug, that I'm addicted to.
I understand that, because I mean, I live it too. When I design buildings, and there is a second, we experience second shot when we go into the building and we see it built, and you think, okay, this was in my mind, and now it stands here. It's so weird. And it's also a little bit in architecture. It's also sometimes funny, because you work so long on these plans, or now in the Beam or the CAD software, and then you move around the floor plans, and when you go into the space, you realize how different it feels. The scale, just seeing it one to one, it's such a weird experience, because you think, oh, I've been moving these floor plans here and there, and then actually walking through them, it's a totally different time, because, for example, to move to one room to the other in the software, it's very quickly, but when you walk through it, it's a completely different experience.
Yeah. Oh, one other thing about that, I was saying it's like a drug I'm addicted to. There's this thing out there called the flow state. If when you're in the creative process, your goal, and you could be a writer, you could be an artist, you could be a designer, you could be anything, is you eventually you get into this state of flow, that where you start to draw upon ideas that you've collected in the past that are in your subconscious mind. But the flow state is this bridge that bridges into this subconscious mind that you have, and starts pulling up ideas that you didn't really even know were in your head. And there's been some studies about the flow state and achieving the flow state when you're a writer, especially, is a really prime example of it. But it does release certain chemicals and endorphins in your brain, they've studied, when you do achieve a flow state. So literally it is like an addiction. And that explains why artists, writers, other creative people are chasing this pursuit when there are a lot easier ways to make a living, and so they don't have, there is an element of being addicted to it, and it's a real thing. It's not a figurative expression.
Yes, just sometimes it's not so instantaneous, this rush. It's I don't know what are the times of designing a project in your field, but for example, in my field, takes sometimes several weeks and until the design idea is completed, and then it starts getting years into the whole building. It's completely finished. So the rush, it's may come in many steps along the timeline of a project. But one thing that I was thinking while was scrolling through the images of your Instagram feed or on your website was also to ask you about the tools. You've certainly started with some tools, but you mentioned yourself you've been now 30 years in the business. How have the tools of the job changed through these 30 years? And how do you keep yourself up to date and up to the, I don't know, because I see some very cool 3D images or some very cool, concept designs, and some of them are, I guess, CGI or something similar. Is this something that you do yourself? or is it something that also you have a team which helps you, or that's the
yeah, I've always embraced this 3D CAD electronic world. And yeah, I guess you would call me some sort of guru with 3D CAD, you know. So yeah, myself personally, I can sit down at a 3D CAD software, you know, modeler, and model up some pretty crazy looking, difficult shapes and things like that. And you know what? It comes from, it's not so much a person's command over this virtual electronic CAD world. I think it's more of a command over your ability to think three-dimensionally and understand how to put something together geometrically. So early in my career, I got frustrated with the processes in design being 2D at first, and then eventually gradually moving to 3D later in the process. Somehow, because people's thinking around that topic was that it's faster and more efficient to stay in the 2D world for a long time and then eventually switch to the 3D world. And I never liked that, because I'm designing a three-dimensional object, so it's more efficient and better to do it in 3D from the beginning. So I was always a physical modeler. I'm not talking about like CAD. I'm talking about carving foam, you know, making mock-ups, you know, doing that. And it was that training. So earlier in my career, I would make so many foam models. I'd always be covered in white dust, and I'd be walking around, you know, like a snowman, and carving foam a lot. And when you do that with your hands, it forces you to be a good designer, because simple is always better. And when you're making a simple form, it's easier to make it. And I noticed that when I was trying to make something complex and build a model of it, you know, to study it, to look at it in real physical 3D with foam, and it was a difficult model to build, and I got stuck, and it took too long, and it was like, I knew the design was bad, because, so there was like tip-offs, like I could not build a model of this thing in an efficient amount of time, and it would look terrible, and so what that would tell me was that the design sucked. The design was bad, you know. So working in 3D makes you a better designer, in my opinion. And then eventually I shifted, you know, I was using CAD software when it was brand new, when there was hardly any CAD softwares on the market. There was Alias, you know, there was Pro Engineer, you know, there wasn't any of all this options that you have now. And you know, I embraced that, because I just saw it as an extension of what I was already doing in the machine shop, you know, and it was healthier because I was starting to breathe in too much dust. And so now I don't make physical models with my hands anymore. I do only 3D CAD, and I do not have any compromise, because there's nothing that I am cheating the process of, because I'm in that world, because my skills and so forth can generate any form, you know. So
And what kind of software do you use nowadays? And also the other question I would have is, now we are entering in this era in which, so to say, digital and physical are starting to connecting, in the sense that 3D printing, it's more and more accessible to the everyday man. So
yeah,
do you think that this physical check that you have before, like when you said you started building a physical model and you saw that the the fabrication process was very difficult, which probably defined the design as a not so good design. This problem will be eliminated when we have 3D printing and also 3D fabrication on a bigger scale with robot arms that will, for example, in the building industry, it's already there, but in the industrial production, that's been there for quite a long time now.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely the same way when you're having a really hard time building a CAD model. It's taking days of time. You kind of know the design's bad. And yeah, I use like, you know, SolidWorks, Creo, Rhino, Keyshot, all kinds of different CAD tools. And you know, the cool thing that's going on is this computational CAD, where you can put some parameters into the system and it's going to generate shapes and things that are outside of the human brain's ability to easily do. And that kind of in its infancy, you know, you see it in like the Zaha Hadid kind of things, or some Ross Lovegrove sculptures like the Gannick sculpture, you know, the computational CAD. And that's like a wave of the future, obviously. You know, soon I think this will advance with AI and, you know, increasing the computational CAD's abilities, where you might even be able to put in parameters of what you're trying to solve, you know, like make it lighter, make it hold up 350 pounds without break. You might be able to put in parameters and then the software might generate some stuff for you. So yeah, it's really exciting, this whole world, you know, of technology and how that's going to affect our output. But you know, my level of being a good, you know, modeler, it really comes from the understanding of geometry, and because you know, still the state of the art of the CAD, you know, these models are going to fail on you and not work and be problematic and be hard if you're trying to do things that just aren't geometrically possible. You know, you're trying to force things into this, you know, that are conflicting with just how a shape really should be, because you're getting fooled in this, you know, virtual world. And so, you know, your understanding of how a form is going to look from its front, side, and back view in three-dimensional space, the better you understand that, the better a CAD modeler you're going to be. Because, you know, it's not the CAD modeler's fault, you know, that this is hard. It's that you're probably trying to do some geometry that's just not working out, you know. So it's, yeah, that's really important, I think.
And yeah, I'm also very curious to understand how people got towards their professional position where they are. And in your case, it will be now. I mean, it will make sense to ask you, how did you transition from school to the professional world, because it's quite a long time ago, I guess. But what was your path in your career to, I don't know, are you now set up as an independent designer in DUMBO, or do you have a team? What was the path towards the current setup you have right now? Because also your website looks like you are quite like a solo designer. But what is your setup, and what was the background to get into this point?
Yeah. Well, my first job out of school, I worked for a design studio. We made a lot of lighting, lamps, and we did some housewares too. So I got the cross-pollination of this sort of architectural contract world with housewares. Then I moved on to the big design firm Teague, Walter Dorwin Teague, and I was there with a team of designers doing medical and technology products and structural packaging and aircraft projects. And then I moved on to another big design firm called Smart Design, where I worked for over a decade, and eventually was design director and VP of industrial design, and always fighting against my natural desire to be hands-on and do designs, myself, as opposed to not doing that and having teams of people do it for me or do it with me. And so eventually what I wanted to do, I started a little brand too, where I was making some product myself, manufacturing it, warehousing it, shipping it, and I had these side projects. So eventually what I wanted to do is just be independent and start a small design firm. And so that's what I did in 2004, and that's what I've continued to do. And my team, I have some freelance people that I work with. I don't really have a lot of full-time people with me all the time. It's a virtual world, so I have some people that will routinely collaborate with me as freelancers. So, and they're mostly engineers, a couple of branding and graphics people, one or two industrial designers as well. I usually do like all the industrial design myself. So, I'm kind of happy that way, where I'm doing a lot of hands-on work.
And what was the preparation for this leap of independence, so to call it? Did you plan it for how long did it take you before you could say, okay, now I'm gonna go independent? Did you maybe prepare some savings so that you could have a first period of time where you could afford to go on without any clients, or did you first get some clients?
Yeah.
How did this transition happen and the preparation for this jump?
Right. Well, yeah, that's a good point. So my preparation for it, I found a client that was willing to give me a royalty. I mean, not a royalty, a retainer. So a monthly check. I would do unlimited amounts of design work for them, and but I knew I had a consistent income. So that's how I did it at first. And then all the while I built up a client base, but I always had a base, like a base. And it was great for them. We did it that way for many years. We did that for 6 or 7 years, and it was great for them because I would have a huge output for them that was probably far exceeding the royalty amount, the retainer amount. But I was guaranteed stability there. So that is how I did that with the retainer.
So basically it's a way of being, so to say, independent, but with this solid base. And
well, I had one client that I would churn out a lot of output throughout the year. And if I were to bill it as each individual project, it probably would have exceeded the retainer by 3 times. But the benefit to me was a steady and guaranteed monthly payment. So, that was an easy way to transition from a steady paycheck to having my own studio. And all the while I was doing this retainer, I was able to start building up other clients.
And for me, it was always fascinating with industrial design. In my head, this is a very, very, very responsible work, because industrial design makes me think of the mass production of a certain object, so that and now when it's mass produced, a lot of people will use it, will have it in their homes or in their hands, and it's a lot of responsibility. and I'm curious in your feed and in your portfolio, people can see a various number of objects that are very different in their nature. So we can have some even a car, pots, coffee machines, shield masks, a lot of things. What is there something that you have designed that has, like, is there some, what are your highlights projects, so to say, that have reached maybe, or that are the most used one, or the most that you see around, or is your design what goes directly then into the factory, or it goes through then a second design team that actually makes it buildable, and then how does this work?
Yeah, well, my designs, I typically deliver enough information, 3D CAD, solid model stuff, that it goes directly to the factory. And oftentimes there's not a whole lot more engineering that needs to be done. As I said, I have some engineers that I collaborate with. So we deliver a full, ready to go, ready to be molded, solution. And like, so you see this little whale behind me here?
Yes.
That blue whale. Yeah, that was a product I did for a baby brand called Skip Hop. And that's a really, really, really successful product still. It was designed in around 2008. And it's one of the most successful baby products, like maybe ever, in that it is just in every new parent's home, and it goes over the bathtub and it prevents the baby from hitting their head on the spout. And it's so iconic that in the Toy Story Pixar era of those animations, this is in the bathtub with all the other toys, so it had a big impact on people from its functional standpoint, its fun, emotional content, to the point where a real product became a fictional product in, like something as big as a Toy Story, animation. So that's cool. It really affected culture in some ways. And then there's a lot of products I've done over the years have sort of a quality about them that sort of has an out of the box, unexpected function, but then merged or combined with this sort of really positive, fun lightness, that's it, that just brings a little bit of joy to people. I always say, if something makes you smile, it becomes easier to use. So if you break down someone's intimidation over a product, the coldness, the steel, the austerity, you break down these qualities right away with your solution, people want to interact with it. They want to pick it up. They gravitate towards it. It's positive energy. If you're a person with positive energy and you walk into a room, everybody looks over at you because there's a real energy field that you're bringing into that environment. That's real. There's a positive energy there, and you can trap that into a product too. There was this exhibition about Michelangelo as a designer and draftsman at the Met Museum a while ago. And there was this really interesting part of the exhibition where he had two busts, Brutus and another bust that Michelangelo sculpted. And then next to it was this other sculptor of the day in the Renaissance named Andre Ferrucci or something like that. And the Ferrucci one was very technical, very exquisite, and had so much detail and so much like prowess over the command of the idea of sculpting, like really, it almost looked like it was CNC machined. It was so perfect, right? And then you contrast it to these two Michelangelo busts that were right next to it, and they were rougher, and they were, but what the Michelangelo busts had were these expressions and this life, and the Ferrucci one looked static, like literally a statue, So the Michelangelo ones and this one, and the Michelangelo ones just trapped into them what the artist, the designer, put into them. So that life, that expression, that life was buried into that product, and it's never ever gonna leave because it's trapped in there. And even now, like 700, 650 years later, it's still just as potent. That energy does not diminish, you see? And that's what a designer can do. That's what a designer can put into a product, and it will be frozen into your product too forever, if it's real.
Yeah, there is this energy can be trapped in several, in design for sure, and also in like buildings too. For example, like if you think about the Eiffel Tower, which has been done now 100 something years ago, and when you go and visit it, I mean, I've never been live, but when you see it, is this eternal shape. You cannot say this is now not cool anymore.
Right.
Or you have it also with a lot of places where you go, and it's always like this. It has this energy. You feel the energy of the
Yeah.
design, and this
Yeah.
and
Yeah. And
it's
that's really, really important because you have to feel it while you're designing, So while you're designing an object or an experience or a digital interface, whatever, you have to feel this positive energy. You have to know that there's something real you're attempting to embed into this, and it's purposeful, and then you will embed it in there. But if you're just grasping at straws and like, oh gee, I hope I can put something together that looks resolved enough so my client will accept it and I can bill this product, then you won't trap in that thing. It has to be your goal to trap that energy into the end result.
yes. And I'm curious, what is the design process of a industrial designer? You mentioned now you have, I don't know if you still have this client with the retainer, or do you have other clients? But what kind of tasks do you get, like design briefs? And usually, what are the time schedules in which you have to deliver a design? And do you design really everything? Because as I said, on your portfolio, people can see very different in nature objects. Like the coffee machine, it's very different than the little whale that protect the sink
Right.
in the bathtub. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm sort of known as a very physical industrial designer, hardware kind of designer. And so most of the projects that come my way are related to physical products. But one of the things that I get asked to do quite a lot is what are called visual brand languages. So it's very important for a big brand to have a look about all of their products that is consistent, that speaks to their brand attributes. A lot of brands, you can mention a name, any kind of brand that you can think of, and certain attributes or feelings about the brand will come to your mind. And those things are critical to the brand's longevity. They don't want to lose that iconic image that comes up in the consumer's mind when their company name is mentioned. And so those attributes, those icons, those feelings you get when you hear the brand name, need to be expressed three-dimensionally through all their products too. So I'm good at that. I'm good at understanding what the brand is all about, why it resonates, what's its positive message, and then translating that into a series of forms and looks and so forth that express those qualities. So visual, that's VBL, visual brand language. I get asked to do that a lot. And then other than that, sometimes I just get like during the pandemic, for example, there was, everybody's business was on hold and there was hardly anything, going on in the heart of the pandemic. And I was working with a company prior to that called Zverse, and they were sort of like a Shapeways, where they would 3D print things for people, and they would have a staff of engineers that would build people's CAD models and then 3D print them. So it was like a technology platform. And that all went away as soon as the pandemic hit. So they, with their spare time, created a face shield and 3D printed it, and they got hundreds of orders. So then they couldn't keep up with the technology of 3D printing. So they took their face shield that they designed and injection molded it. And when they tooled it and took that risk, basically, and they did it in the US, they overnight became the #1 supplier of face shields, because there was a shortage. As you might remember, there was this shortage of PPE. And so because they had made it in the next town over, essentially, and they didn't have to worry about things stuck on a freighter out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, they were able to fulfill 1 million orders off of this face shield. And so then they called me and they said, okay, we're selling the heck out of this face shield. So can you design us one that is more thoughtful? Because the one that we designed, we did it in like 2 days. Let's really do a great one. So I started working with them on a face shield. And the one that I did, again, it's out of the box. It's not what you expect. Right here. Yeah, so it goes on the bottom. See, it comes up from the bottom as opposed to down from the top of the head. And then this thing kind of goes on your neck like a stethoscope here. And so it literally takes this archetype and turns it upside down, literally. And it's just something no one's ever really thought about. And the reason it came up is because what we were trying to do is create a product that would help people get back to work. Like we were thinking about, this pandemic's going to end. We got to get people back to work, get the economy going again. So what can we do for the service worker? What can we do for the dentist? What can we do for the school teacher? What do they need? And like a service worker or a dentist, they have all this stuff on their head already. They have the loop. They might be wearing a communication headset. And so that gave life to this idea of coming up from the bottom, not the top. And then boom, you got something that everybody, is amazed with, because it's different. No one's done it. No one's thought of it. And then it has all this surprising fringe benefits, like Hollywood. All these Hollywood stars wanted this because it doesn't mess up hair and makeup. It can go on from the bottom. So we had this surprise where all of a sudden now we have Brad Pitt. We got Sandra Bullock. We got all these big celebrities wearing this, and we have photos of them wearing it. So I don't know. We made this thing. We sold millions of them, during the pandemic.
I saw a picture of Martin Sheen on your Instagram.
Martin Sheen wearing it. Yeah. So I'll get projects like this that are individual product design, and it's just about trying to do something better, thinking about the problem. So this was born out of this notion of a set criteria of, okay, let's satisfy the needs of the service worker, the specialized medical person, the teacher, and what are the problems with traditional face shields? You don't want to always put something on your head. It wrecks your personal presentation. What if you have, what if it conflicts with your hairstyle? All these things are important. And this doesn't even affect the head at all. It doesn't interface the head, so.
And
cool.
do you think that now that you're more experienced, you have a bigger, so to say, information base as a background that helps you come up with these ideas? Because obviously, by working in the field, maybe you're faster into seeing, okay, how we can do it different, and then you see these things very quickly. Is it something that grows with experience?
Yes. Yeah, it's because the mind is this digital camera. It's a database. It's like a computer. And the more stuff that you're exposed to, the more is in your computer, your head. And then, the easier it is to draw that stuff back out. And I was talking about that flow state. And that is like a natural bridge to this stuff that you have pre-stored, And one of the, there's this notion of design thinking that people talk about in the design industry. And one of my issues with that is that they always tell you to leave your preconceived notions at the door, to check your preconceived, to not consider what you might already know, and open your mind up to only new things that you might observe as you're attempting to work on this new project. And I think that's bad, because as a designer, it's been your mission in life to be observant. And it's been your goal as a designer, that is who you are, not what you do, that helps you to collect all this information. And that makes you very, very different from almost everyone else out there in the world, in that you're consciously and proactively sensitizing your mind to see these elements that you might be able to use later and wield. And if there's a process out there that a lot of the industry is really into, and champions, that tells you to disregard all that, that's just inherently bad, So as you get more and more experience, you become, you graduate from a young designer to a more mature, older designer. Coming up with good ideas is a lot easier, and it's just because of your experience.
I think by seeing your design and your work, also your sculptures, I would define you as something like a modern Baroque, because Baroque style, because it's always this continuous line. Like I see that you have taken a surface and bended it, and I think you have a great also abilities to take the defining lines of an animal over an object. I see, or for example, the bear and the bull, the elephant and the bird. Also, actually, the bird is really nice because you can place it into Piazza Navona in Rome, where I was used to be very often in my younger years. So how about your sculpture? Do you do also some art exposition? I have seen that you have done also some like in life built sculptures too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, I find sculpture and design very similar. I mean, one of the things I love about industrial design is the sculptural aspect of it. And so it's very natural to transition to pure sculpture. And also another thing about design that I really love is not so much always focused on solving the physical problem, but creating shapes that bring forth such positive, qualities about them just based on their emotional content. And so by stripping away function from an object is not necessarily a bad thing, because it can still improve everyone's life and outlook because of the feeling that it projects to them when they interact with it. So, and especially now, the world is getting more and more digital and less physical in a lot of ways. And so this notion of being able to generate positivity that leaves the world of physical and mechanical problem solving is more important than ever. And that's what sculpture does. Sculpture and fine art conjure up or bring forth feelings from our subconscious mind, that generate positivity and interest, and they're intriguing, and so I don't see it as so different from what is going on in my world of industrial design, because it's a similar thing. And one thing about my forms, this idea of flow in terms of being able to enter the flow state, that is extremely related to what is called there's a law of physics actually called constructal law that was kind of coined by this physicist at Duke University named Adrian Bejan. And it states that life needs flow to survive. So I saw a recent example down in the Florida Everglades, for example. They put this highway right through the Everglades, and it cut the natural flow of the water from north to south. And the highway defines, on one side it's death, and on the other side it's life, right? So literally they cut the flow off. And it's the same with form. A flow in the form allows it to meet our minds in a way that we can comprehend it easier. And it's related, not figuratively, but literally, to this notion of constructal law that Adrian Bejan coined, in that, life needs flow. If you have a river and you put a dam up next to it, you create all kinds of ecological issues, because you cut the flow. And it's very, very, similar in the way that you could create a form in terms of how easy it's going to be to interact with it and how pleasurable and positive the experience will be. So it's not a figurative thing, it's a literal, physical, actual thing.
Yeah, I think in the architectural world, these shapes are more to be seen into the buildings of Zaha Hadid. If you know her, she was a Iraqi architect, but she grew up in England, and she was based in London. And we have had one of the designer or a couple of the designers that work at her company, and the designs are always very, very fluid. But they talking about some different kind of flow of the creative flow. Do you have some ritual when you start working and designing? Also, because you mentioned nowadays the world is more and more digital, and we have more and more of these distractions. but like they're very weird tools. I like to call them social media because they have the benefit of broadcasting our work or our design, or in my case, my podcast. But in the same time, they take away from your attention. So, do you have some certain ritual that you do when you get into the studio, where you, I don't know, do you maybe isolate yourself somehow and start working long time without checking anything, or do you don't need that? How do you approach this aspect of the creative work?
Yeah. Well, it depends on the complexity of it, but I always find in the beginning, it's, you're searching for this point of view. And I always find that your first concept, getting a first concept highly defined and out there sort of frees up or enables the rest of them to start going, and so sometimes it's difficult to get to the first concept, but once you have gotten there, the fact that you have means that you've been thinking about it while you've been sleeping. You've kind of been thinking about it in your off time, and now your brain's all tuned up to this task at hand. And then the second one, the third one, the enhancements of the evolution of the designs as you're going starts to get better and better. I also find sometimes, especially if I'm sketching out these sculptural ideas, music is good. You have music going, and somehow that music allows or has your brain distracted or divert, goes on this diversion. The music acts as a diversionary element that so back and forth, you're hearing these melodies and rhythms and so forth, and you then get distracted from struggle of the task at hand, the hardness of it, of breaking through, and it pulls you into an area where you have broken through, and it's like a diversionary thing, I think, that's going on inside of your mind, because otherwise you can get kind of lost in the frustration or the hardness of attempting to do something, and if you become frustrated in a design project, also, this is a really important thing. If you become frustrated and and you're going through what people call like the project hell, it's because you don't have enough information. You're missing information. And like not everybody can sit down and do their taxes, they have their accountant, they're missing information. It would be frustrating for them to do it, so I always tell people, when they hit that frustration, that they need to mood board. They need to look through Instagrams. They need to get away from the drawing table and put the pen down, because they're missing information, and that's all there is. That's what that anxiety is coming from. And so you need to go out and get that information, and then it'll be easier. So
yeah, and maybe structure this information, because you have to go through the information, pick what you think it's the right one, and maybe put it together, and then maybe shut off the flow of incoming information and focus on the outcoming info or output. I always like to think the mind is like a water pipe. You can rather put water in or put water out. You cannot do simultaneous flow, because it's gonna be a disaster. This is how I feel about it. This is what are my personal conclusions so far on the creative process, that you have to first take all this input and then stop it, and say, okay, this is enough. Now I have to come up with something.
Yeah, for sure.
And in the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned something interesting that I didn't find out about you because, of course, before talking to you, I didn't know you personally. And I like to keep my research on my guests the minimal possible so that I get surprised also by the conversation, and it's not something that I already know, or just I do it because, you know, I want to talk to you. But you mentioned that you work with a TV channel or on a TV show. Tell me more about this. Well, what is this? What is this project? What is the TV channel? What is it about?
It's a show called America by Design, and we focus on real design innovation, mainly created by industrial designers, UX designers, teams at big companies and small ones, entrepreneurs, independent designers, and we just talk a little bit about how this product came into being, what is the big innovation, how does it impact people's lives, why design is important. And the cool thing about the show is that it's bringing these ideas out to the masses, like the TV audience, and that hasn't been done much. If you ask the average person walking down the street what an industrial designer or UX designer is, they don't know. They have no idea what that means. Do you design factories? And whereas if you say, what's an architect? Everyone will know, well, they create the plans for buildings, they make buildings. But this idea, this word design is very abstract. It's an abstract word. Regular people, not designers, their minds go straight back to, say, the kindergarten table, where kids were drawing a scene from the yard, and they draw a tree and a daisy and their mom. And then the kids that couldn't draw, they would make like a scribbly line, a spirographical abstraction on the page with their crayon. And the teacher would say, that's okay, that's a design, And literally that's how people think. They don't understand what design is at all. And so this TV show is great because it's shining a light on this abstract world that we all think everybody knows about, but no one does. And so it's on CBS television, and it's broadcast nationally. And then we do international spotlights. So we involve other designers from around the world too. It's not just America. And then we have judges. So we actually make the whole format very approachable to the TV audience by giving them something to root for and to vote for and so on. And then by having a judging panel, you get to hear the opinions of real professionals, and it's very interesting and authentic. And so it's a fun show to work on. And I'm one of the presenters and judges, and I get to candidly talk about whatever project is being shown and give my opinions on that. And hearing a bunch of designers rattle off their opinions about all these projects, to a design trained ear, some of it sounds basic, but to someone who associates design with that kindergarten abstract crayon line, it's really fascinating, So it's a great opportunity. We're pushing the profession out there more,
But the designers who are participating or being judged, are they not professional yet, or are they some people that are?
No, they're very professional in many cases. Sometimes
okay.
we'll look at a design created by some of the best design firms in the whole country, and then other segments are products that were created more by an individual entrepreneur. But it doesn't matter. What we're trying to shine a light on is innovation. What does it take to create something brand new that solves a problem? And that's what the show's all about.
Yeah, I think that it's very important to create these formats because there are not a lot of them. And for example, the only one that I've seen recently that was made for the masses was Abstract on Netflix. Was this show? I don't know if you have been able to watch it, where they feature architects, stage designers, fashion designers, industrial designers, cartoonists. And another one that I love, it's Chef's Table. Although it's about chefs, it's like the whole way it's presented with the music, with the way it's filmed. It's so cool. And I think we don't have enough of those shows in which you can really focus on something positive, as you were saying before, instead of having the typical a news show that it's polarizing, and you just get upset no matter which side you are on. You just get upset, and this is, I think, more of this content is necessary to give you something constructive in a daily basis. Recently I have found out another podcast is called In Your Shoes. It's hosted by it's called
Mauro Porcini.
Mauro Porcini. Yeah, he's the PepsiCo designer.
He's on the show. He's on our show.
He's on your show. Okay.
Yes.
I have been able to text to him on Instagram too, and I've sent him an invitation. Let's hope he'll find a time in our schedule.
I'll send him a note that said I was on it, and then
Yeah, so cool. And I think it's great, and I think it's I'm trying to, as I said, I'm trying to create dialogue in my small part, and to connect together different dots. And I think that talking to people like you has this, every show I've done, there are at least a couple of really highlight moments where you have this okay, this is another little dot in my knowledge that has unlocked something new. And I think that the great of podcast is that it stays there and it doesn't age, because if some designer gonna listen this in a couple of years, it will be still valid, and it will be still very useful, I think.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
So I think we have covered most of it. I don't want to take away any more time from your day. Last but not least, where can people find more about you online?
Oh, well, I have my website, scotthendersonINC.com, and my Instagram is Scott_Henderson_INC. And I write a column for the IDSA's Innovation magazine. Oh, my LinkedIn, you can find me on LinkedIn. So I put a lot of stuff on LinkedIn.
I will be putting all the links in the description of this podcast. I don't know yet if it will be only audio or also video form, but people for sure will be able to click on the links and check you. And and I suggest them to go see your feed, because it's really interesting and inspiring. So thank you very much, Scott, and I wish you a very good day in DUMBO. Enjoy.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.